Hello everyone, Prosperity here. I hope everything is going well for you in Legion. With everything that's happening with the expansion, I think it's high time to start the guide series for the classes we've covered so far. And with that said, welcome to the ultimate guide to the Protection Paladin in Legion. Before we get started, I need to warn you that everything I'll be talking about in this video will be said assuming that you are familiar with the spellbook and talents. If you aren't familiar with everything yet, please take a moment to pause this video and go watch my Protection Paladin overview series. I'll leave links to the videos on screen and in the description below for you. With that out of the way, let's get started with the comprehensive guide for protection. This video will be broken up into 3 parts: artifact traits, talent builds, and your skill priority. First up, let's talk about your artifact Truthguard. The ability you get with this weapon is called Eye of Tyr. It's instant cast and on a 1-minute cooldown, and when activated deals a moderate amount of damage to all enemies within 8 yards of you. Any enemy hit by the spell will have their damage done to you reduced by 25% for 9 seconds. While the spell has both damage and mitigation components, it should be used primarily as an initial mitigation tool to make sure you don't take too much damage at the beginning of a fight. Outside of that, make use of the damage reduction when you've run out of charges of Shield of the Righteous to postpone the need for one of your bigger cooldowns like Ardent Defender. Now, as far as the artifact power tree goes, I'm just going to cover the 3 major traits in the order in which they should be activated. The minor traits will definitely help you out a lot, but the major or golden ones are crucial to your success. The 3 major traits in the order they should be activated are Bulwark of Order, Tyr's Enforcer, and Light of the Titans. Since the minor traits don't matter as much, and your whole tree will be filled out eventually anyway, it's best to take the shortest route possible to each of these in this order, then fill out the rest of the minor traits from there. Bulwark of Order is first because it gives you an excellent source of active mitigation in the form of a shield based on the damage of your Avenger's shield that lasts for 8 seconds. This mitigation tool complements your Shield of the Righteous quite well. Even on single target fights, if you've taken the first Avenger talent, this is a great source of mitigation, mainly in that it will be used much more frequently than your Shield of the Righteous. Tyr's Enforcer causes Avenger's shield to deal an additional bit of damage to all enemies within 5 yards of any enemy hit by it. The extra damage caused also contributes to the shield you get from Bulwark of Order. It's not as impressive in single target fights, but will help you tremendously in keeping aggro on small packs of adds, whether you're in the boss room or fighting trash mobs. Light of the Titans causes your Light of the Protector to heal you for almost an entire flash of light's worth of health over 15 seconds. This effect is extremely powerful in terms of sheer survivability, but since it's inherently reactive, it's at the end of the list. However, the effect is nothing to scoff at and will help you tremendously in your endeavors once it's unlocked. One last note about the artifact before we move on. The last 2 minor traits to be filled out should be Stern Judgment and Forbearant Faithful, the 2 directly to the right of Tyr's Enforcer. These 2 traits don't really bring anything to the table mechanically that is worth as much as the rest of the minor traits available, so you should activate them last. Otherwise, fill out your tree as you wish. Now that the artifact has been discussed at length, let's talk about talent builds. There are 2 builds I'll be going over, one for general purpose and one for rating. These builds should just be guidelines and shouldn't be taken as absolute gospel, but are good starting points for you to use as you wish. Also note that the 3rd tier at level 45 will almost always be a tech choice. It has no real consequence on your build and should be chosen depending on what you need for a particular encounter. First up, the general purpose build. This build is very good for completing world content and is even good enough to use in 5-man content, but isn't optimized for raiding. The build is as follows: Blessed Hammer, Bastion of Light, Blinding Light, Cavalier, Knight Templar, Judgment of Light, and Righteous Protector. This build focuses slightly less on survivability and more on mobility and keeping aggro on lots of enemies at once. It makes use of your core combat abilities for most of your mitigation and has the synergy between Cavalier and Knight Templar to keep yourself from taking a lot of damage while gathering and positioning enemies. Now, the raiding build is close to the other build, but with a few key differences. You'll take Blessed Hammer, Bastion of Light, have a tech choice between Fist of Justice and Blinding Light, Blessing of Spell Warding, tech choice between Hand of the Protector and Final Stand, Judgment of Light, and Righteous Protector. The build cuts out the mobility of the other build to focus more on sheer survivability. The tech choices mentioned for the build are changes that you'll make to the build for specific fights. In most situations for raids, you'll take Blinding Light over Fist of Justice, as there aren't stunnable enemies very often in raid encounters. As for the choice between Hand of Protector and Final Stand, this mostly comes down to single target versus AoE, but also depends on your team's composition. If you'll be used in a fight to grab snap aggro on a lot of enemies at once, Final Stand is invaluable. Otherwise, you should go with Hand of the Protector. Two final notes here. If you prefer Seraphim over Righteous Protector, do not take it without taking Bastion of Light if you will have most of the aggro in an encounter. Without Bastion, you will lose out on a hell of a lot of survivability. You can also consider taking Holy Shield to compensate for the survivability loss from taking Seraphim over Righteous Protector. Other note, do not feel compelled to take First Avenger for single target situations. You'll still get a bit of active mitigation from the increased Avenger Shield damage, but at the cost of your Shield of the Righteous uptime. The last section here will be going over the general priority list for your spells and abilities. This list isn't necessarily the order in which you should use the abilities, but the priority of which they take over one another. Let's start with your combat abilities. Avenger's Shield to pull at the beginning of a fight. Judgment and Consecration. Avenger's Shield, Shield of the Righteous if you're at 3 charges. Light of the Protector if you're missing health. Shield of the Righteous if Light of the Protector has over 3 seconds left on its cooldown. Bastion of Light if no Shield of the Righteous charges are available. And Blessed Hammer between every ability while in melee range. One note to be made here, if you are going for more DPS than survivability in single target, switch Judgment and Avenger's Shield in the priority list. Do the same for any AoE encounter with 3 or more enemies. This will ensure optimal damage in either situation, while also ensuring the effective active mitigation from your Avenger's Shield in AoE situations. When you need to use a defensive cooldown, you should choose one based on the priority as follows: Eye of Tyr, Ardent Defender, Guardian of Ancient Kings, Divine Shield if you need to remove a fatal effect or can tank swap, Blessing of Protection / Spell Warding, and Lay on Hands. The priority list of your defensive cooldowns is just a guideline. There will be situations in which certain cooldowns will be more valuable to use over others, but that completely depends on the fight you're on. That's all I have for the ultimate guide to the Protection Paladin in Legion. Hopefully this video will help you to solidify your mastery of the spec, teaching you good practices to follow in your endeavors. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below or on Twitter at @TheLoranzas. Don't forget to subscribe for more Legion class overviews and guides. Thank you for watching, and as always, have fun.